I assume you clicked on this video because you've noticed how super popular it is right now to use a wide cinematic aspect ratio for your videos, and you're wondering how to do it. The standard aspect ratios are 4:3 and 16:9. Both of which are very popular. You see them all over the place. The more cinematic aspect ratios are longer and thinner. Some popular ones are 1.85, which is slightly thinner than 16:9, and 2.39, which is anamorphic. It's quite a bit thinner than 16:9. Now, if you want to be legit, like this guy, you can get this look by de-squeezing anamorphic footage. But that is both costly and complex to shoot and process. And most of us just don't have the time or money it takes to do it well. But you can still get that look by just adding black bars to the top and bottom of your footage. And I'm going to show you a couple ways to do it. But first, some math. For my example, I'm going to be using 1080 footage, which is 1080 by 1920. And I'm going to be putting it into the 2.39 aspect ratio. But the equation I'm about to give you will work with footage of any resolution and any desired aspect ratio. You want to take the original height of your footage and you want to subtract the original width of your footage divided by your desired aspect ratio. And then you want to divide that whole thing by 2. So for our example, we're going to take 1080, we're going to subtract 1920 divided by 2.39, and then we're going to divide that by 2. That gives us about 138. So if you add a bar at the top that's 138 pixels tall, and you add one at the bottom that's 138 pixels tall, then what you're left with is a resolution of 1920 wide by 804 tall. And if you divide 1920 by 804, you get 2.388. There are a couple of ways to actually add those black bars to the top and bottom of your footage. One way is to use what's called a legacy title in Premiere. That basically just puts 2 rectangles over your footage. You can do a very similar thing with an Illustrator file. Now that's my preferred method because then I can build those bars just once and pull it into whatever project file I need it in. Or you can use what's called a nested sequence. And I'm going to cover all 3 of those and talk about some of their pluses and minuses. Okay, so it's pretty easy to do in Premiere. You just need to go to File, New, and create a legacy title. Make sure the resolution is where you want it. And then I'm just going to call this black bars so that I know what I'm working with. Then once this window loads, I'm going to make a rectangle. Doesn't matter what size because I'm going to set it specifically. Then with it selected, you can go to the width and set it to 1922 just to be safe. And the height to 138 for this example. Then I'm going to set the color to black. Now with the selection tool highlighted, you can option click and drag to duplicate that. And then we will set our positions. I'm going to set the X position to 960 because that centers it, and the Y position to 68 because that puts it at the height that I want. And then for the second one, I'm going to do the same thing, 960 to center it, and then 1012 to put it at the bottom. Then all you need to do is drop that title on top of your footage, and you can see it. I prefer to make those black bars in Illustrator so that I have a reusable file that I can just pull into any Premiere project where I need them, and I don't have to make them over and over. So to do that, I'm just going to go File, New. I'm going to go to the Film and Video presets, grab 1080. Real quick, I'm going to flip this so that we have a black fill and no stroke. Then with the rectangle tool, I'm going to click in the upper left corner, set my width to 1920 and my height to 138. Then with the selection tool, I'm going to option click and drag down, put that in the middle. And I'm just going to verify that that lined up with the corner correctly. It doesn't always, and that can be really frustrating when it's over your footage and it's off by a pixel. So I'm going to save that. I'm saving this in my video resources folder, which I sync via Dropbox. And I just put reusable resources for various video projects there. I'm going to call this 2.39 aspect bars for 1080. That way I know exactly what it is, and anytime I need it, I can just grab it and pull it into a project. The defaults are fine on this save dialog. And now we're good to go. Back in the project, we can just import that Illustrator file and drop it on top of our footage. Now, one advantage of using an Illustrator file over a PNG or TIFF is that it's a live Illustrator file. So if you need to make any tweaks or changes to it, all you need to do is make that change. Say you want a dark gray instead of a black. I don't know that I would do that, but for the sake of example, you can make that change and hit save, and then it will live update in the Premiere project. One advantage of either the Premiere Legacy Title method or the Illustrator method is that you can lower the opacity of these black bars while you're editing, so that you can see what lies outside of your final frame, and you can make decisions about what you want to keep in that frame. So if you want to raise this or lower this, you can. You can still move stuff around in the nested method. You just can't see what's there until you move it, like you can with this method. One other method for getting those black bars is to use a nested sequence. So if you select the footage that you want to be nested, you can right click and click nest. It's going to give you the option to name that sequence. I don't really care what it's called. And now we have two sequences. We have our nested sequence, which has the actual footage in it. If you had multiple clips, they would all be here. And you can build your sequence here if you want. And then you have the original sequence, which has just the whole nested sequence as one piece together. What we're going to do is click on our nested sequence and go to sequence settings, choose custom, and set this to the aspect ratio that we want, which in this case is 804. I'm going to hit tab to commit that. Everything else should be fine. I'm going to hit OK. It wants to delete all the previews. That's fine. It'll rebuild them. Now we have our footage in the correct aspect ratio. If you go back to the original sequence, you can see that because it's centered, it now has black bars above and below it. So one advantage of this method is that you can bounce it out either way. So if I'm in this sequence and I hit Command M, it's going to give me the option to export this with the black bars burned in. Or if I go to my nested sequence and I hit Command M, I can bounce it out at just this aspect ratio without the black bars. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't be afraid to ask any questions you might have in the comments below, or if you have another method for getting one of these wide aspect ratios, let me know. Or if you make any awesome videos with one of these methods, be sure to send it my way. I would love to see it.